Yep.
All right, we're going to go through Exodus 30, parts of Exodus 32 through 34, and then chapter 40. And recall the last 3 weeks we've been going through the last part of Exodus in a topical way. The first two, we talked about the things in the temple, okay, the all of the thing, the and all the meaning and the way that all of those different parts of the temple, the structure itself, and all of the table, the holy of holies, and the all of those furniture, really, how it was. All of them were symbolic of things that occurred in the future times in the Bible, and they all have relevance to us today. And then last week we studied about the priests. That meant for our lesson Aaron and his sons, and their role was ceremonial and educational as they taught the people to obey the law. And we saw that all the things they wore, all of the steps they went through, were all calibrated to show God's holiness and to show how, if they didn't do them right, that they weren't clean enough to be near God. They weren't holy enough to be in his presence. So they had to do everything just right, wear just the right things for them to be acceptable to go into the temple and to go into the Holy of Holies. Well, in this week's lesson, we're going to focus on Moses and aspect of Moses that shows his leadership and his compassion for the people. And because we're going to go follow Moses from that mountaintop experience, that Elijah on the top of the mountain defeating all the priests of Baal, going from that wonderful bliss with God there down into the valley in the plains below and seeing what had happened in his absence. And that was the golden calf. Despite the people's sin of building that golden calf, Moses nevertheless showed great leadership by enforcing a discipline on the people and by fervently interceding to God on their behalf for him not to destroy them. And through faith and God's grace, Moses helped restore the Lord's presence among his people. And this is maybe the first of many instances in the Bible where there's this pattern, this cycle of sin, followed by disciplining, followed by the people realizing through the discipline that they did wrong and asking for God to forgive them, followed by God's forgiveness and restoration. It's a cycle that occurs throughout the Bible, especially in the book of Judges, where there's one, the new judge came along. That would be the restoration, but then things degrade, just like that. It shows just how patient and how abundantly merciful our God is to be so patient with us. That's where we are today still. The reason he hasn't come, the reason Jesus hasn't come is because God is still patient and wants to save as many of us as he can. So that's going to be our lesson today. And Ida is going to be our reader. We're both at a disadvantage today because we both had our eyes dilated at the doctors for a check. It's going to be a struggle, but we're going to we're gonna, with God's strength and help, we'll get through this.
Would you like one of us to
So
read?
Exodus 32, verse. No, no, I think it will be
Okay.
okay.
See how this goes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Okay.
When the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Come on, they said, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses, who brought us here from the land of Egypt. So Aaron said, take the gold rings from the ears of your wives and sons and daughters and bring them to me. All the people took the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. Then Aaron took the gold, melted it down, and molded it into the shape of a calf. When the people saw it, they exclaimed, Oh, Israel, these are the gods who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Aaron saw how excited the people were, so he built an altar in front of the calf. Then he announced, Tomorrow will be a festival to the Lord. The people got up early the next morning to sacrifice burnt offerings and peace offerings. After this, they celebrated with feasting and drinking, and they indulged in pagan revelry. The Lord, quick, go down the mountain. Your people, whom you brought from the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. I command calf, and they have bowed down and sacrificed to it. They are saying, These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Then the Lord said, I have seen how stubborn and rebellious these people are. Now leave me alone so my fierce anger can blaze against them and to a great nation. But Moses tried to pacify the Lord his God. Oh Lord, he said, why are you so angry with your own people, whom you brought from the land of Egypt with such great power and such a strong hand? Why let the Egyptians say, their God rescued them with the evil intention of slaughtering them in the mountains and wiping from the face of the earth? Turn away from your fierce anger. Change your mind about this terrible disaster you have threatened against your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You bound yourself with an oath to them, saying, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give them all of this land that I have promised to your. So the Lord changed his mind about the terrible disaster he had threatened to bring on his people. Then Moses turned and went down the mountain. He held in his hands the two stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant. They were inscribed on front and back, on both sides, front and back. these these tablets were God's work. The work on them were written by God himself. When Joshua heard that boisterous noise of the people shouting below them, he exclaimed to Moses, It sounds like war in the camp. But Moses replied, No, it's not a shout of victory, nor the wailing of defeat. I heard the sound of a celebration. When they came near the camp, Moses saw the calf and the dancing, and he burned with anger. He threw the stone tablets to the ground, smashing them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf they had made and burned it. Then he ground it into powder, threw it into the water, and forced the people to drink it. Finally, he turned to Aaron and demanded, What did these people do to you to make you bring such terrible sin upon them? Don't get so upset, my lord, Aaron replied. You yourself know how evil these people are. They said to me, Make us gods who will lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses, who brought us here from the land of Egypt. So I told them, Whoever has gold jewelry, take it off. When they brought it to me, I simply threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. He saw that Aaron had let the people get completely out of control, much to the amusement of their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and shouted, "All of you who are on the Lord's side, come here and join me." And all the Levites gathered around him. Moses told them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each of you take your swords and go back and forth from one end of the camp to the other. Kill everyone, even your brothers, friends, and neighbors." The Levites obeyed Moses' command, and about 3,000 people died that day. Then Moses told the Levites, "Today you have ordained yourselves for the service of the Lord, for you obeyed him even though it meant killing your own sons and brothers. Today you have earned a blessing."
Okay, we'll stop there and pick it up when we get to it in my explanation, and I give your voice a little rest there. Well, quite a tale there. Yeah. So just to summarize what Ida said, and yeah, actually looking back in time just a little bit, so while they were at Sinai there, the Jewish people did what? They made this solemn vow to obey every command God gave them. However, God knew their hearts lacked the genuine commitment. And so they were just saying, yeah, that sounds good. We'll do that. And so this golden calf exposed how shallow their loyalty and love and faith in God was. Moses called what they did a great sin, and his assessment was accurate. The transgression was huge for several reasons. First, the perpetrator was the nation of Israel, God's chosen people. They're the ones making a golden calf. The second is that they committed the sin right there at the base of Mount Sinai, where they could still see God's glorious smoke up there in the mountains, and where God had revealed his glory to everyone, and where they had seen him give Moses his laws on the tablets. And that though they had pledged obedience, they'd quickly violated the first, the second, and the seventh commandments by creating this golden calf and engaging in the revelry they did. It wasn't just disobedience, it was rejection of God's and his goodness. It warranted righteous anger. We look at Deuteronomy 9:7 in the second telling of all this. It says, remember and never forget how angry you made the Lord your God out in the wilderness from the day you left Egypt until now, you have been constantly rebelling against him. And that's topic title there is remembering the golden calf. So that's part of that remembrance. Well, God's reaction to the Israelites' sin reminds us of the consequence of our sin. Uh, but let's think about it. Why did Israel yield to such evil at such a glorious moment? It's likely due to the being impatient, just like we are. It's like, especially in today's world where we want instant response. Yeah, Moses didn't give him an instant response. He didn't go up the mountain and come back the next day with stone tablets and all of the instructions for how to build the temple and how to outfit all the priests and everything. It was 40 days he was gone up on that mountain with no food they knew of. So they didn't know if he's alive or dead or what. They didn't have faith. And that led them to eventually criticize Moses' leadership and to do what was right in their eyes. And so that's what they did. Aaron and the tribal leaders also bore some of the blame, though they had authority from Moses and could have told them, no, we're not going to do that. They failed to do. They were scared of the people. He gave in, Moses did, or Aaron did, to the crowd, and then later offered that feeble excuse that, well, this golden calf jumped out of the fire. And he attempted to then shift the blame to the fire. Yes, yeah. But God saw through his excuses, of course, and it was only through Moses' intercession that he didn't destroy Aaron. Again, if we look at the second telling in chapter 9 of Deuteronomy, the Lord was so angry with Aaron that he wanted to destroy him too. But I prayed for Aaron, and the Lord spared him. So here's that leadership that's coming out in Moses. Israel's tendency toward idolatry was shaped in Egypt, and it still had a grip on them, especially on their hearts. Aaron then worsened it by yielding to their demands. And that's something we can take away ourselves, because sometimes what people need is tough love, not sweet, give them what they want love. This if the way Wiersbe calls it is to address their felt needs without considering their spiritual needs or even their long-term needs. So Israel mistook desire for faith. You ever seen the first Narnia movie or read the first book about the little guy? I forgot his name, but it was he was did by Turkish delight, and it led him to do things he would never do
Mr.
normally.
Tumnus.
And that's what. No, it was the little boy.
Oh,
One the children who
oh yeah.
was yeah who did
Sorry.
that anyway. Um, I shouldn't have brought that up
Edmund.
without the name of the guy. Sorry about
Edmund,
that.
yeah.
Edmund, there we go. Oh, thanks.
hmm
Anyway, um, they mistook desire for faith, and they traded God's glory for an idol, imitating the heathen nations all around them. Let's not jump to judgment too quickly, because we do the same thing. We rush into sin and tend to delay checking with God whether that would be okay or with Him or not. So it's a lesson for us. Well, then Ida read about the divine discipline, and that brings home the fact that while God forgives, sin has its consequences. Nevertheless, God forgave David, for example, later on in the Bible, but he suffered in his household. Terrible things happened in his household after that. And ultimately, it was probably that sin that contributed at least to the division of the north and south kingdoms. Sin has long lasting effects. Well, Moses did his job. He disciplined the people. And when he descended from that mountain with Joshua there, he was so angry. He broke those tablets, but he was showing not anger so much as anguish rather than what you'd call rage. Breaking the tablets symbolized Israel's breach with the covenant. They'd broken 3 of the commandments at least, and signaled a coming judgment, because the way that covenant worked was you do these things and good things will happen. You break those laws and bad things will happen. Do you sign up to that? And everybody said yes. Well, okay, so here's the consequence. Moses, of course, he held Aaron ultimately responsible and accountable, because leadership, in this case, Aaron's leadership while Moses was gone, brings responsibility. Moses then just went to the people and asked plainly, who is on the Lord's side? Only the Levites responded. Ignoring family ties, then the Levites executed 3,000 men involved in that revelry. Paul later referenced this episode as a warning to Christians. Let's see what Paul has to say about it in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, first 12 verses. I don't want you to forget, dear brothers and sisters, about our ancestors in the wilderness long ago. All of them were guided by a cloud that moved ahead of them, and all of them walked through the sea on dry ground. In the cloud and in the sea, all of them were baptized as followers of Moses. All of them ate the same spiritual food, and all of them drank the same spiritual water, for they drank from the spiritual rock that traveled with them. That rock was Jesus Christ. Oh, love that. Yet God wasn't pleased with them most of the time, and their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. These things happened as a warning to us so that we would not crave evil things as they did, or worship idols as some of them did. As the scripture says, the people celebrated with feasting and drinking, and they indulged in pagan revelry. We must not engage in sexual immorality as some of them did, causing 23,000 of them to die in one day. Nor should we put Christ to the test as some of them did and then died from snake bites. Well, that was later, so we'll stop it at that point. But that's that. So Paul references this. We'll get to some of the things he said. He talked about later about 23,000 dying. Well, we'll get there. Moses destroyed the idol, and it was maybe it was overlaid with gold, a wooden structure overlaid with gold, because he burned it, and it burned. And then he ground that gold into powder, and then he cast the powder into water, and then he made the people drink that water, that gold water. Why did he do that? Because that act compelled the people to confront their sin. And then he retreated back to Mount Sinai, and he had fasted and interceded for 40 days and 40 nights again for them. He even offered to give up his life for their salvation. So that's in, have we gotten to that yet? It's in 32. So we haven't gotten there, but we will. And he even offered to give up his life for their salvation, and God refused it. The Lord promised his continuing guidance, but warned of coming judgment. Had Israel known Moses' costly sacrifice, they might have valued him a little more as a leader. But that's the price of leadership. So then what happens is, let's go on in the reading, Ida, to the next verses. And that's what this is about here.
The next day, Moses said to the people, "You have committed a terrible sin, but I will go back up to the Lord on the mountain. Perhaps I will be able to obtain forgiveness for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a terrible sin these people have committed. They have made gods of gold for themselves. But now, if you will only forgive their sin, but if not, erase my name from your record you have written." But the Lord replied to Moses, "No, I will erase the name of everyone who has sinned against me. Now go, lead the people to the place I told you about. Look, my angel will lead the way before you, and when I come to call the people to account, I will certainly hold them responsible for their sins." Then the Lord sent a great plague upon the people because they had worshipped the calf Aaron had made. The Lord said to Moses, "Get going, you and the people you brought up from the land of Egypt. Go up to the land I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I told them, I will give this land to your descendants, and I will send an angel before you to drive out the Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Go up to this land that flows with milk and honey, but I will not travel among you. For you are a stubborn and rebellious people. If I did, I would surely destroy you along the way. When the people heard these stern words, they went into mourning and stopped wearing their jewelry and fine clothes. For the Lord had told Moses to tell them, you are a stubborn and rebellious people. If I went to travel with you for even a moment, I would destroy you. Remove your jewelry and fine clothes while I decide what to do with you. So from the time they left Mount Sinai, the Israelites wore no more jewelry or fine clothes. It was Moses' practice to take the tent of meeting and set it up some distance from the camp. Everyone who wanted to make a request of the Lord would go to the tent of meeting outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent of meeting, all the people would get up and stand in the entrance of their own tents. They would all watch Moses until he disappeared inside. As he went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and hover at its entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. When the people saw the cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they would stand and bow down in front of their own tents. Inside the tent of meeting, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Afterward, Moses would return to the camp, but the young man who assisted him, Joshua, son of Nun, would remain behind in the tent of meeting.
All right. So first, God, let's see, yes, sent that plague, right? Toll is unknown. Though the Levites killed 3,000, God knew every guilty person. Sometimes God delays his judgment, but it does arrive. As the scripture says in 1 John 5:16 and 17, there is a sin leading to death. Second, God withheld his presence from their journey. That really got to them. Though God upheld his covenant to the patriarchs, he said, you're going to get to go to the promised land. He said, I'm not going to lead you directly like I've been doing. Instead, I will send an angel. Why? Because you are a stiff-necked people. Better for God to withdraw than to destroy you. Because God is goodness. God is holiness. You can't be around such sin. Well, hearing this, they said, uh-oh. They mourned and they removed their ornaments. Their gold had fueled the idol, and now they understood the seriousness, maybe, of their sin. So let's get rid of the gold. Let's stop trying to show off, and let's obey God. Only God knew if their repentance was genuine, but that's what they did. Well, this third judgment, okay, so one of the judgments was to send that plague. The second one was to say, I'm not going to be with you. He relented on that one. The third one was to require Moses to relocate the tent of meeting outside the camp for personal encounters with God. God's message there is that your camp isn't holy enough for me. Now, wasn't the tabernacle, they didn't move. The tabernacle was still in the center of the camp. This was a special tent for consulting with God that only Moses had ever had one of those. And there God spoke with him face to face like friends. That's a figure of speech. He didn't really see God's face in front of him. At least that's my understanding. And that pillar of cloud hovered at the tent's entrance during their conversations. So people could all look out there and see that God was still there, but that cloud was not in the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle anymore. That sin had really cost them. They'd lost their lives and friends of friends and family, and they lost God's presence and intimacy in their journey. Takes us to the next one, which is grace. God's servant intercedes. So that's 33:12 through 34:28. I think we're going to have to skim through some of this. Let's see what we've got. This is important.
One day Moses said to the Lord, "You have been telling me, take these people up to the promised land, but you haven't told me whom you will send with me. You have told me, I know your name and that you look favorably on me. Let me know your ways so I may understand you more fully and continue to enjoy your favor. And remember that this nation is your very own people." The Lord replied, "I will personally go with you, Moses. I will give you rest. Everything will be fine for you." Then Moses said, "If you don't personally go with us, don't make us leave this place. How will anyone know that you look favorably on me and on your people, if you don't go with us? For your presence among us sets your people and me apart from all other people on the earth." The Lord replied to Moses, "I will indeed do what you have asked for. I look favorably on you, and I know you by name." Moses responded, "Then show me your glorious presence." The Lord replied, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will call out my name Yahweh before you. For I will show mercy to anyone I choose, and I will show compassion to anyone I choose. But you may not look directly at my face, for no one may see me and live." The Lord continued, Look, stand near me on this rock. As my glorious presence passes by, I will hide you in the crevice of the nook and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and let you see me from behind, but my face will not be seen.
Stop there. So during his second 40-day stay up in Sinai, Moses pleads with God to restore the blessings to the people that God had given them before. And God does. Moses recalled God's promises and their praises at the Red Sea. He appealed to God's mercy and acknowledged God's sin. God's it appealed to God's mercy and acknowledged Israel's sin, and God's presence. Moses knew was the only thing that made Israel distinct. So God said, "Moses, okay, I will lead them with you." So brings up the question, can believers negotiate with God like Moses did? Or remember, Abraham did that before Sodom and Gomorrah, trying to say how many people, good people, can there be? It depends on their relationship with him. That's Wiersbe's assessment. Moses knew God's ways and pleaded with both humility and faith. Samuel Rutherford once said, "It is faith's work to claim and challenge loving kindness out of all the roughest strokes of God's." And that's exactly what Moses did. Jesus has a story about where this lady kept on pleading with it was a parable about the lady pleading with the crooked uh, judge, and the judge wouldn't. Finally, he let her hear her case because she kept bugging him about it. So by pleading, he was saying, plead with God. Sometimes that's what you're supposed to do. And then God revealed his glory to Moses. This is such a unique chapter or section of the Bible itself. Moses wanted God's glory more than anything else. he'd seen the divine manifestations of it more than anybody probably before him, but he asked for a personal revelation, and God granted a guarded glimpse, and that was enough. When sin discourages God's servants, something like this, a renewed vision of God's glory, can restore their broken spirits. I know, Moses, yeah, he was being that leader, but he must have had a heavy heart because of what the people had done. And then God granted forgiveness. God renewed the covenant, one through his mercy, by replacing the tablets that Moses had broken. And that's what we'll read starting in chapter 34 here.
Then the Lord told Moses, "Chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones. I will write on them the same words that were on the tablets you smashed. Be ready in the morning to climb up Mount Sinai and present yourself to me on the top of the mountain. No one else may come with you. In fact, no one is to appear anywhere on the mountain. Do not even let the flocks or herds graze near the mountain." So Moses chiseled out 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. Early in the morning he climbed Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him, and he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hands. Then the Lord came down in a cloud and stood there with him, and he called out his own name, Yahweh. The Lord passed in front of Moses, calling out, "Yahweh, the Lord, the God of compassion and mercy. I am slow to anger and filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. I lavish unfailing love to 1,000 generations. I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin, but I do not excuse the guilty. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children and grandchildren. The entire family is affected, even children in the 3rd and 4th generations." Moses immediately threw himself to the ground and worshipped, and he said, "Oh Lord, if it is true that I have found favor with you, then please travel with me. Yes, this is a stubborn and rebellious people."
Okay, so the Lord says, I will travel with you.
Okay.
And then the people were able to see the awesome power of the Lord again. And he says, I'm going to drive out those people, the Amorites and so forth. But he says, he goes into things like saying, don't make a treaty with these guys, because if you do, you're gonna get this trapped by them, their evil ways. And when you come upon their pagan altars, you got to break them down. And so those things that they later didn't do, but he wanted them to do. No treaties. You must not celebrate any of their festivals, and you must celebrate the festival of unleavened bread. And so the whole thing there about the different festivals that we've gone through before, and about how to do the sacrifices and those things. I think that we've covered. And so let's go ahead with the discussion of it. So God relented and did renew that covenant, and he replaced the tablets that Moses had broken, and signaled in that way a restoration of that covenant. Before anything else, Moses heard God proclaim Yahweh, and it proclaimed his attributes. Moses, identifying with the people's sin, asked for forgiveness, and God responded with mercy. He did it for Moses. He renewed the covenant, and he emphasized, this time be obedient, and especially about the command to reject idolatry. Israel's later conquest of Canaan required, as it said there, removing all the idols, all the idolatry that was polluting that land. It was their faith in God's covenant that preserved Israel's purpose, which was to use Canaan as a base, a face to bless the rest of the world, ultimately through Jesus Christ. Out of his grace, God provided three blessings: his presence, okay, he went with them, a glimpse of his glory to Moses, and the people could see a glimpse of his glory through that Shekinah cloud that came out of the Holy of Holies, and of course, through his forgiveness. With these new tablets, Moses shared God's mercy with the people. And that leads us to the last quick section here. And I'm just going to tell you about it. Exodus begins with Moses witnessing God's glory in the burning bush. And it ends with God's glory descending into the camp and filling the tabernacle. Well, we have to go see that part. 34:29 through 35. Yeah. So Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the tablets, and then he called all the people, and they all um, they all came. And when Moses finished speaking to them, he covered his face with a veil. But whenever he went into the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, see, the Lord's there in the tent of meeting now. He'd remove the veil until he came out again. Then he would give the people whatever instructions the Lord had given him. So that's how it worked. And the people of Israel would see the radiant glow of Moses' face. And he would put the veil over his face until he returned to speak to the Lord. So it begins with that glory and ends with that glory. This presence wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity, because that's what distinguished Israel as God's people and sanctified their tabernacle. So we have we see here God's glory is reflected and it's resident. So it's reflected in that after fasting and praying in God's presence for 80 days, Moses' face shone. He reflected God's glory with a glimpse, just a tiny glimpse of God's brilliance and light. And it frightened the people. And he veiled his face as the aura faded. Paul compares Moses fading, that faded glory, with the decline of the Mosaic legal system, contrasting it with the increasing splendor of the gospel of grace. That was a technique Paul used to try to help people understand how the things that Moses is just now setting up, the Mosaic covenant and the laws that go with that, that had served its purpose by Paul's time and was fading, and the gospel of grace was rising. Well, Paul also applied this event to the veiled hearts of unbelieving Jews and the gospel's transformative power in believers. And then we have that, okay, so it's reflected in Moses' face and it's also resident. Despite Moses' close encounter with God, the people were not aware just how close they came to being eliminated. And this faithful intercession by Moses was of a resolute kind of servant and one who holds tremendous spiritual power. We need such intercessors today who grasp God's promises and trust in his strength. Tabernacle's completion there, it prompted a thorough inspection by Moses and ensured its adherence to God's commands, and he meticulously anointed the positions of every element God ordained. So Moses, after they built the tabernacle the first time, Moses went through there and anointed everything. Ministry's not about doing things our way and asking God to bless them. It's about doing things God's way, even if they might not make sense, like splattering blood on this beautiful things, and asking God to bless his ways. So it's not about us doing it our way and asking God to bless it. It's about us doing things God's way and asking Him to bless it. And we do that. How do we do that? By obediently discerning God's will. Where do we get that? A lot from this Bible, and by glorifying Him in His presence and His direction, and His blessings will then follow it. Us. Once they consecrated it, the tabernacle filled with God's glory, symbolized by this Hebrew word Shekinah. I use that a lot, but that's the Hebrew, which means the abiding presence of God. And it was of such intensity that Moses couldn't enter the tabernacle without that veil on. In Jewish history, the departure of God's glory signified divine judgment for sin. Similarly, Solomon's temple, when Solomon built the temple, the people witnessed God's glory come in at its dedication, came in through that east gate. Sadly, eventually they lost that glory, departed the temple after enough of Israel's sins out of the east gate. And that was visions of Ezekiel, had those several visions about God's glory departing. And then, did we ever see God's glory again? Yes, because it manifested itself in Jesus Christ. And now, where is that glory? Now it resides in each of us individually, collectively as a church, and universally as a people. Buildings dedicated to God, like the tabernacle or the temple, are tools for His work, but His dwelling is with the people. So let's ensure, like Moses, that our lives and gatherings reflect a heavenly blueprint and invite God's glory to dwell amongst us rather than outside our camp. So, to summarize, in this lesson, we reflected upon Moses' journey from encountering God's presence with delight to grappling. He was up there on that mountain, to grappling with disappointment in his people. Despite their grievous transgression of the golden calf, Moses showed leadership by enacting discipline and fervently interceding on their behalf. And through unwavering faith and relying on God's mercy, Moses restored God's presence among his people. And then we noted that the pattern of sin, discipline, restoration occurs often in the Bible. And it's there. It's not, it's part of being a falling world, but God uses it to reveal His abundant patience. Next week, we're going to go. I talked about going to the New Testament, but I forgot that we'd gone through both books on Acts. So to keep things in phase, we're going to go from Exodus to Leviticus, which is good because Leviticus is like just a continuation in a way of Exodus. And we're going to learn about the 5 themes of the book of Leviticus. And they are all related to holiness. You can think of the book of Leviticus as the book of holiness. We're going to learn about a holy God, a holy priesthood, a holy people, a holy land, and a holy Savior. And that's in chapter 1 of Wiersbe's Be Holy. So how are we doing on getting the books out?
I haven't started sending them yet, but I will.
Because I didn't tell you. Oh. Well, you'll have them by next week. Okay.
Yay. It's okay.
All right. Let me then open the floor for any comments. I ran late. I apologize for that. It's a lot. I'll try to do better in the future.
Well,
No.
we started late, so
It was a good information.
yes, it was.
Sure was.
Meeting was great. And
Even with,
Heisey will be back in 6 weeks.
oh,
I don't know. He'll be back in 6 weeks.
Okay.
I found that out from his sister-in-law.
Okay.
okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Bitsy.
Here.
Mhm.
I got a text. I wasn't during the meeting. I got a text during the meeting, so I thought I'd let y'all know. He's been located.
Okay. Good. Thank you for sharing that. And I wasn't thinking any evil thoughts about you when you said that about what is she doing going off and calling people on the no. All right. Well, if there aren't any more, I know we ran late, so I'll go ahead and close with a prayer. If there aren't any more comments.